We're in Govan Old Churchyard. This is a graveyard of kings. The story of the Govan Stones stretches right back to the birth of Christianity on the Clyde, right through the political tumult of Scotland's Viking Age, into Govan's shipbuilding boom, and a lot of it is an untold story, which is a good thing for today's purposes. We are celebrating the Untold Stories Doors Open Day Festival. They've gone digital for the first time ever this year, and to help us tell that long and complicated tale of the Govan Stones, we've got a very special guest with us today. Let's head inside and meet Professor Stephen Driscoll from Glasgow University Archaeology Department.
Hello, Emma.
Hi Steve, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a bit of a dreek day in the churchyard, but
I know, but you always get a thrill coming in here. Such an amazing space.
I've probably hundreds of times I've come through that door and it doesn't get any less the thrill of the church, definitely.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, Steve, what's your particular interest in the site at Govan Old?
Well, my interest in the site really stems from the fact that there's this collection of sculpture from the early Middle Ages which we needed to have a better understanding of, about the church, about its setting, and try to kind of put a chronology to it. So I've been working on this for about 30 years and have been drawn into the bigger conservation and refurbishment plan associated with the church.
So viewers might notice, Steve, even from where we're standing, there are a lot of these stones dotted around the church. Can it be the case that they've all been found in Govan?
Yes, so in fact every available space has a stone put against it. You know, it's really densely filled, and this is a huge collection, and it all comes from the churchyard. And these stones, I think many of them were never lost. They were used over the years, and then eventually their antiquity was recognized and they were brought inside. And that particularly happened in the beginning of the 20th century.
Okay, so something remarkable has been happening in Govan in the early medieval period. We know
absolutely,
that.
Yes.
So turning to this remarkable collection of stones, Steve, viewers will be able to pick out some of this interesting imagery here. Could you maybe talk us through what we're seeing?
So there's this large collection of sculpture is often described as being part of the Govan school, or kind of collectively described as a school, because there's a lot of shared features, and you'll pick that up as we move along. But this one is one of the more interesting ones in the sense that it doesn't fit the pattern. So it's a very roughly shaped stone. You can see it has this big swirling boss on it, which gives it its nickname, the Sunstone. But as we move around it, you can see that it's pretty roughly shaped. And the thinking is that this is maybe a monument that originally was a prehistoric standing stone that has been repurposed and Christianized. And I hope once you get your eyes in, you'll see that all of this interlaced design, although a bit rough and ready, forms a crucifix, and there are twisted beasts on either side, and then a really peculiar equestrian figure. Well, it's not equestrian. It's presumably a warrior figure with a sword running here and possibly a spear mounted on some kind of creature, but it's not really looking like a horse. What are your theories?
Well, the most popular theory that I hear is from the local primary schools that visit, and they
good
collectively,
authority.
and those guys have collectively decided that what we're looking at is a bear wearing trainers here.
Well,
can you disprove that?
I don't know if they had trainers in the 10th
terrifying.
century, but you know.
Another question that visitors ask a lot, Steve, is this bit up here looks a bit like
so,
Lego.
So you can see that it's been shaped. You know, there's a tenon, and it's to take another piece of stone, but really, we have no idea what that would be. It may be that it was a cross, you know, made this into a full cross. We just don't know. But, you know, one of the thoughts is that there's a good chance that it's actually not far from here, that it's somewhere still in the graveyard.
Can I ask, Steve, this one is grouped with two other stones. Do we have a similar?
These ones, as we're walking along here, these ones are actually freestanding crosses. So they were always meant to be vertical. And when they were new, this would have had, a head, so it would have had arms and a head. So, a cross, a Celtic cross. And this is a really nicely made one. You can see the shapings well made, and the quality of the carving is very good. The precision and tightness of the knotwork, it's good. So this is a very accomplished piece of sculpture, and we have another one of these mounted figures here. And this character is clearly on a horse, although is he wearing a hood or a cloak or something? It's kind of hard to tell.
If you don't mind an interruption, Steve, one of our volunteers has pointed out that thinks there might be some parallels.
Yeah, so I think this is highly likely. So if you look at it, it's a very static picture, isn't it? The horse, all 4 feet are on the ground, it's just kind of posed. So there is very similarity. And this is almost certainly the representation of a Pictish king who died in 820. So, what we see here with the sculptures, there's quite a lot of cultural interplay here. So we might think, on the one hand, this is a great collection of Viking Age sculpture, and it is, and arguably the most important in Scotland, but it's showing a lot of interconnectivity. So the knotwork and everything very strongly connected throughout the Western British world, Celtic world, you would say. And then you've got this Pictish equestrian thing coming through, and then lots of Norse detailing here and there. So the crosses function to kind of mark key places in the churchyard, but most of these ones, and it's confusing because we've put them up on edge. So it's confusing because we think, it's more of the same, but these are recumbent stones, and these stones are meant to really be sitting on top of a grave. So these are grave markers, and this one's actually broken off, so it's only about 3/4 of its length. But the complete ones are big enough to cover a body.
And so, does this inscription tell us anything about the person who would have originally been under this in the early medieval?
Sadly not. None of the inscriptions we have are contemporary with the sculpture. So if this stone was made, say, around the year 1000, this inscription is made around 1700. So this is, we know who these people are who are here, but they are kind of people from the community. And I think that's one of the really fascinating things. There's a lot of depth of biography of these monuments to be explored. And here, this surname, so this stands for Andrew Rowan and his wife Janet Rowan, I for Jai, and they are associated with Bellahusta. So the place that becomes the park was originally an estate and a big house. About half of the stones have been reused in early modern times, and unfortunately there's no inscriptions which go with any of the original sculpture. So we don't. We're down to the archaeology. The archaeology becomes so important because there isn't much textual history, and really we struggle to kind of even place the Northern Britons into a political context. It's.
I certainly, the first time I visited the Govan Stones, found it very useful to have a visual representation.
So in this period of the Viking Age, there's lots of different cultural, political formations, and the Britons, who are speaking a kind of Old Welsh, are in this southwest of Scotland area, where they've been forever, and Govan is kind of at their mouth gateway into this wider world, which is very Gallicized. So the orange stuff is where the Gaelic-speaking peoples are, and then all the blue stuff is Pictish, and really we would want to maybe start throwing in some colouring for Norse up in the Western and Northern Isles, and then of course down in the bottom we've got Anglo-Saxons, which are next door neighbours. So there's quite a lot of interpenetration culturally from all these different groups.
It looks like it's quite a turbulent political time that we're doing.
Yes, and the point is, we talk about the Viking Age because the Viking Age is one of these moments where all these political groups get a shake-up, and it's remade, and the Norse find themselves with a foothold in various parts of the world, and this is one of those places.
Steve, we've seen at the standing crosses and also at the recumbents here with
Yeah.
this Christian imagery and some of the Pictish influence, but I haven't seen anything I would particularly characterise as maybe Viking or Norse imagery. Is that evident elsewhere in the collection at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, in some ways, the most famous parts of the collection is this group of sculpture which we call hogback stones, and they're quite distinctive, and they take us directly into this world of the interplay between the Norse and native, the Northern Britons, Northern English as well. So Yorkshire, Cumbria, and southern Scotland have lots of these monuments that are kind of similar. They have a kind of similarity, but these ones are remarkable because they're absolutely colossal.
They're giant, these things. Look at them.
They're by far bigger than any of the other ones anywhere in the British Isles, and they're 2 or 3 times the size of most hogbacks.
We have Glasgow bruisers here in
These are
Scotland to
totally,
learn with.
yeah, absolutely.
And is 5 a large quantity of them?
Well,
today?
there are some places in Northern England which have a dozen or more, but this is by far the biggest collection in Scotland. Most places just have 1 or 2.
So they're strange looking big things,
Yeah.
and they're very unusual
They're almost
shape.
like creatures, aren't they?
Yeah, they do look as if they're about to come to life to reanimate.
But they're not really meant to be halls. That's just a kind of nickname for this general shape. They're meant to be buildings. And you can see these rectangular panels all over it. And these are shingles. So these are meant to be roof shingles. And so we've got the representation of a building. And also, you can pick this, the walls kind of bow out, almost like an upturned boat.
And we have this image here.
Yeah, so this is the kind of thing. So you might think that we're looking at something like a chieftain's hall, a Viking age chieftain's hall. So this is a kind of house for the dead.
And can I ask Steve the actual function of a hogback? What's it doing?
So house for the dead. So these are like those recumbent stones. These are meant to be on top of a grave.
So they're performing the same function as those more demure, subtle stones, but
Yeah.
something with the symbolism is changing.
Well, I mean, and also very much more prominent. They would really stand out in the churchyard. You fall over them. They're painted.
And these have been standing outside in Govan for over 1,000 years.
Well, yeah. So
It's remarkable.
and the earliest photographs we have show them, visible features in the churchyard. So they're still being there, and you get a sense as you look at them that the tops are pretty eroded because they've been exposed to the weather, whereas the lower bits have been protected. And in fact, in one way, the most chronologically helpful of the monuments, and possibly the earliest, is this one over here. And this one is great. You can really get that sense of these protective beasts which are clasping. Protecting each end. So
Could potentially be quite frightening.
they're maybe meant to be dragons or some such.
Okay.
Mythical beast. And the other thing is, there's a kind of decorative trim at the foot of the.
I wonder if it might be helpful to have a
light.
torch here, Steve.
And so, this is a bit of a kind of niche point, but it's the detail of the way this interlace ribbon has been executed with like dots and the kind of angular patterns and so on, which let us say this is Viking age. It's a Viking style of sculpture, or Viking-influenced type of sculpture, and maybe let's date it to sometime around 900, maybe 950. I mean, it's not a very exact science, the chronological estimation of art history.
Steve, a question we often hear as visitors come in and encounter the hogbacks is a lot of people have this idea of Viking burial being boat burials and maybe furnished graves with swords in with the body. Have you ever found evidence of those traditions in Govan Churchyard?
Well, it's never been reported, and my excavations didn't recover anything like that. And I would kind of not expect it, because I think by the time that we're talking about, say around 900, the whole tradition of this kind of conspicuous heathen pagan burial in the ship with swords and everything, that's a falling out of fashion. So it's not so common. But what's clear is they're still wanting to commemorate the dead in a kind of spectacular way. They're just using a different medium.
Yeah. So Steve has mentioned that these are unique to Govan in the size and concentration of the hogbacks. But I think there's another unique monument Steve would like to cover.
Even more unique in the sense there's only one of them, and this is the sarcophagus. And the sarcophagus it's carved out of a single block of stone. It's decorated all around, and there's nothing like it in Scotland at all. There's only one slightly similar one elsewhere in Britain, so it's really unusual.
I would describe it as the star of the show if you weren't here, Steve.
Yeah,
being the star
of course,
of the show.
yeah, thank you. But no, you're right. It's a remarkable thing, and it's partially remarkable because of its uniqueness, but also its condition is really impressive. Let's have a look at it. Part of its appeal is that it's not weathered like the others, so you really get a sense of the depth and the quality of the carving, or in some cases the limitations of the carving. So there's this terrifically evocative hunting scene. You've got this warrior mounted on the horse. He's got this very pointy beard and long hair, and it's a hunting scene because there's a deer here and probably a hound up there. But it's a bit flat.
And Steve, unlike the hogbacks, it doesn't look like it's meant to go on top of a body. Does this have a different function?
Well, this is a sarcophagus, so it's intended to actually contain the body. And what we think is, because it's decorated all around, that this is a container that's intended to be on display in a church and to hold the relics. And in this case, we're talking about the relics of St. Constantine. And who is St. Constantine? Well, St. Constantine is a disputed figure, but probably the most likely person is a king of Scotland who dies in 876, and he is described as a martyr, and his sister is married to the king of Strathclyde. So somehow, and we have no idea how, it looks like his remains end up here, and this becomes the reason this is the most important church in Strathclyde. This is the royal centre for the kingdom of Strathclyde, and that's why all these people are buried here.
So Steve, we perhaps have a monument that's been in Govan for over 1,000 years that speaks to relationships and political alliances in this turbulent pre-Scottish atmosphere.
So if I may I ask a question, Steve, about what happened to, it looks like there would have been a lid on this. What do we think happens to that? Is it still in Govan?
When it was found in 1855, they were digging graves, and they found this empty sarcophagus in the churchyard, where I guess it had been dumped immediately after the Reformation, because they didn't believe in intervention of saints. But so the lid is not with us. You can see there's a certain amount of damage, but it's pretty complete. So I guess the lid is probably still in the churchyard, buried somewhere. Maybe it's been built into the churchyard wall, maybe it's in the foundation of this building, but I'm sure it's around. And we'd love to know what it was like. We'd love to know whether it was pitched up like maybe like a church shrine, or whether it was more flat.
And speaking of this, potentially lost lid, that sounds like something that future archaeological investigations could do.
Well,
is that a possibility?
Obviously, the churchyard has only been scratched, really. Very little of it's been excavated by archaeologists. So there's any amount of material still to be discovered there.
I'm very excited to show off some recent discoveries.
Yeah, so, just last year we were doing a kind of community-based archaeological project which involved looking for some stones which had allegedly been lost, but they've just been buried under the soil, and it was really good fun, and it's great to see the reaction of Mark, who was a volunteer that day when they peeled the turf back and found another one of these recumbent stones. So
we actually have a surprise question pre-submitted from
yes,
Mark.
yes.
Steve Ambishon, he unsurprisingly would like to know, when can he get digging again? Will there be future excavations?
Well, there will be future excavations because we know so little about what's going on, but the context in which we'll be doing digging in immediate future is to do with the redevelopment. So some of the new services and paving and so on will require some excavation. So we're planning probably in a year's time.
Okay, so if we take a wee wander down to the front of the church, it sounds like this space is going to be undergoing some exciting redevelopment for the future.
The work has already started. So the Govan Heritage Trust, who owns this building, are currently refurbishing the lower church and turning that into office space, which will provide an income to help support the building.
So the museum space and the community space will be able to sustain itself.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And
brilliant.
the other thing is we're very keen that the building is used, for performances, for music. It's an amazing space, and but it's held back at the moment because there's no good visitor facilities. Disabled access is rubbish, and so we've got a scheme and we've got planning permission. This is an early sketch, but basically a reception area, a bit more office space, disabled access, and just all of the facilities that you need to actually, hold events.
It sounds like it's
so
a bright
that's
future.
that's going to start. That work is starting now.